Welcome to the Divorce Dad Playbook podcast. Happy Christmas, Scott. How are you?
Merry. Very well.
The theme song today for the show is my favorite Christmas song, karaoke version, of course. Before we get to that, two things. One, I want to sort of address what we're going to do on this show, and it's very important to you. So that's why I want to talk about it at the beginning. First, we're going to talk about essentially what happened to me over the last few days is people are finding out a lot about me because they're listening to the show, and it has impacted my dating life. And I want to see that doesn't pertain to other people, even to you, but I want to see how people react to that. Like, do you want people you're dating now to know about your past? And moreover, do you want to know about the person who you're dating now's past? So we'll get to that in a couple of minutes.
Yep.
Because I know that came up with you a little bit too. Before we get to that, Scott, my lips are a little chapped. So not a sponsor, but I just want to, what's
Aquaphor?
I said not a sponsor.
Oh, well.
Oh, God. It popped and now my thumb is covered in Aquaphor. That was not planned. Oh, no. Oh, God, this is so gross. Ready? Let's play this song.
Super gross.
Oh, God, this is so gross. Not planned. This was planned. Oh, God. You know what song is this? Yeah. Tell me, you know? Because they're not kicking in lyrics here.
Merry Christmas.
Up on the hot. No, it's Jackson 5. Up on the rooftop. Click, click, click. Down came the chimney, old Saint Nick.
Yeah. This is your favorite song?
This is my favorite Christmas song. Yeah, I'm not even joking. This is my favorite Christmas song. Apparently, well, I knew this, not apparently. It's a Gene Autry song. And that's probably like, up on the rooftop, click, 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 down through the chim. I think that's exactly how it goes. This is a little more upbeat than that. So I did the karaoke version. I can't do the Michael Jackson falsetto.
All I Want for Christmas is my favorite song.
The Mariah Carey one?
Yeah. I mean, it's sung by a lot of people. I actually really like the movie Love Actually. Yeah, I know she did.
So then it's the Mariah Carey.
Yes, but I like the movie Love Actually. And a lot of people have strong feelings about that.
You are just a hopeless romantic, and I am a guy with a thumb covered in jelly. Oh, there's the headline.
What is that beeping?
It's the song. I have no idea.
Oh, that's a weird part of the song.
All right, well, the song's over, so.
All right, well,
song's
happy
over.
holiday.
Happy holiday to you. So as I said right before we played the song, and I stuck my thumb in a vat of clear oil. I don't know. Is that oil? Petroleum jelly? Anyway.
Just keep going.
I'm going. I don't know what to do because I'm not pausing the show. So literally my thumb is covered.
So just wipe on your pajamas. You have pajama pants on, don't you?
Shut up. Of course I do. It's like 7 a.m.
I'm dressed.
I doubt it.
I'm dressed. Pants.
Oh, all right, pants. We are very happy today to have Dawn Aversa, who is a life insurance person, who's a financial planner, on the show. Cool thing about this, and we talk about this in the interview, she listens to the show and basically reached out and we talked about this a few episodes ago because she was the one who was similar to you, was like, everybody goes through this. Yep. And I was like, stop saying that to me. But then she put some interesting things on her Instagram, and I was like, you know what, you should be on the show. And it's very helpful. I know this is a really, really important thing for you. So I'm glad that we're finally able to get to that with life insurance, health insurance, not so much health insurance, but like life planning.
Yes. Very important to me, and should be to everybody who has kids.
Yes. And more so to me now than I realized. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. And then on the back end of that, to finish up the show, I know you have some thoughts about some of this on your own, maybe in addition to what Dawn and I talked about. We're going to give you an opportunity to do that. But before that, I mentioned this right before the song and the Aquaphor. Do you want to know about the past of a person who you are starting to date now? And do you want them to know about you? Does that help you? I thought, Scott, that it would help the people who were trying to match with me if they know, oh, by the way, I talk about this stuff for a living. This is what I do now. Because a lot of people put that they're shy. Now, that doesn't pertain to anyone, so I don't want to waste time on that. But what it brought up was people who say, I only want to know about what you do with me. I don't care what you're doing when you're not with me. But that's not true. That's not true. People say that and they don't believe it. Because I've had people listen to the show and hear something that turns their stomach or turns their brain.
Yeah. So what you're talking about though is different than what the question is that you asked. You're talking about, do people want to hear what you're currently doing with other people, versus I think the actual question and the more pertinent question to our audience is, when you do start dating, do you want to share your past dating life and maybe married life with them? And do you want to know about their past? Not if you're juggling people at the same time. That's different.
That's fair. That's fair. Although I will say that I have been stuck more than once by the homeless woman thing. I mean, and that's in the past, theoretically. I mean, it's still part of my ongoing adventures. Fine.
Yes, but I mean, the past is the past. Like, I am dating somebody now, only one person. So it's very different than, maybe what you do.
You don't have to say that with such a condescending tone.
It wasn't condescending. I'm just talking about myself. And so we've had conversations about the past, and, we go through, a lot of things, and you know what I always say is, I don't really care about what she did prior to meeting me. It's only since the time she has met me and moving forward is what I care about, because that's our relationship. And what she did beforehand was what she did. Now, that had to build her character.
Do you want to hear it though? Not are you asking it? Not is it a deal breaker, but do you want to know is what I'm asking.
No, you know what? And I think this is interesting. I actually do want to hear some of it, because once you get to a certain point, you want to know what your partner has been through, because it really does dictate how they're going to be engaging and interacting with you. And I think that's really helpful. And I think, and I know sometimes you may have taken this the wrong way, or some listeners may have taken this in the wrong way, but I feel like communication is key and critical. And I think if you don't,
in this case, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And I think if you don't understand your new partner, and you don't understand what they've been through, look, everyone's got their stuff, right? Like, everyone's got their stuff in their background. Everyone's got their stuff with people they've dated. I'll get into this because I'll read an email I got from somebody asking me, imploring me to talk about some of this stuff. So I think I'm on the spot to talk about some things in the past, and my experience and how I made it through, and how I got past some of these things. But I think if you really do want to date somebody, you have to understand some things, and you should want to understand some things in their past. Not every detail, not everything they've done, not every, drunken night and stupid thing they might have done, but
sure,
who they've dated and how that went and why it didn't work, in order to make sure that you're matched well and that you have hope for a future together. I think that's really critical and really important.
I do think that part of what I was saying before, Scott, does pertain. I mean, you kind of went right to like the dating exploits thing, but I am very open about my own mistakes that I made during my marriage and continue to make after my marriage, and also my own, sort of personal journey and mental health issues and things like that, which isn't who I've dated in the past, but it certainly has shaped my relationships. And I think that's kind of where, to broaden this out a little bit, that's kind of where I think I was going with this when I said, like, I talk about on the show, people are freaked out a lot. People hear the stuff, and I get texts and like, I just got to episode 9, and I'm like, does that mean you don't want to hang out anymore? They're like, it's just a little scary or something like that. And you know what? I own that, because obviously I own that. I put it on my dating profile. I don't hide it from people, but some people don't want to know. I told you one time somebody said that was inappropriate to put on my dating profile. That should be a third date or later conversation, once you know if the person likes you. That was literally, a woman followed me or matched with me on a dating app just to tell me that she thought what I put in my dating app was inappropriate. And then we unmatched. So people get really upset about that. They're not ready to learn everything about you. Well, you're at a later point in that. So maybe is now the time, or do you?
No, I actually don't think I'm necessarily at a later point. I think, and I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna
No, go ahead, do it. Yeah, go ahead.
read this email simply because it was very interesting to me that somebody would reach out, because the way that I view people, um, having listened to the podcast to this point is, you know, you definitely are in a place where you're experiencing more and you're learning more, and you're doing more in a sense, but it doesn't mean that I've at all have perfected this path, right? But I do have some unique experiences. So I agree with
All
what
right,
you're
yeah,
saying.
go ahead.
I agree with what you're saying. So fortunately slash unfortunately, we're talking about this you know this sort of time frame of when people were born. So I hate to do this test, but this is another Nicole. This reached out to me. So we have a lot of Nicoles in our world. So there's another one. I was going to make up a different name, but I'm just going to keep it straight.
God.
So what Nicole reached out to me and said in an email was, "Hey Scott, love the podcast and the interaction with your brother. It would be great if you could talk about your experience when you got divorced. I've been out here almost as long as you and have met mostly narcissists and guys that are competitive with me, which isn't necessary. So please share some of your experiences to give me some hope I won't grow old alone."
Not dissimilar to some of the conversations I've had, even with me being out there a shorter amount of time. That is something that I am hearing. I actually had coffee with a woman yesterday. Same thing. She's like, "I've been divorced for a while. I don't have any friends that I like trust. I don't have a guy. I go to work. I see my kids. I go to work. I see my kids." She's like, "I don't want this to be the rest of my life. I'm scared." So I think
Yeah.
she's like trying to find something. And so it's similar to that. But obviously you have thoughts about that. So go ahead.
Yeah, I do have thoughts about it, and I get it. So, what I would say to anybody who's in that position, and by the way, you don't have to have been out here for as long as I have to feel
Mhm.
that. You just have to get through the first, like the first experiences. And the first experiences, you're just trying to survive. And now, when you get to this point of what Nicole's saying and what other people are saying, is okay, you're kind of made it through the survival part. Like you kind of got some things down, but what the hell? Like, I can't seem to match with people who are, um, quote unquote normal. And
Dude.
no, no, no. And I'm saying that's what people are saying to me. I
I get that.
understand.
Normal is a 4-letter word.
Right. What does that mean?
It means most curses are 4-letter words. You've never heard that expression?
No.
If you say
But in
something
any
is a
case,
4-letter word, it means it's a curse. It's like a bad word to me. Don't say normal to me. It's
oh,
essentially,
well, I was repeating what somebody else was saying to me. I wasn't saying normal. I
I'm not
understand.
saying that's you. I'm saying in general, that's the adage. A word that you don't like, that's offensive to you, is a 4-letter word. Everyone knows that.
Well, not everyone, because I didn't realize
Now
that, but that's
everyone.
okay. No, I don't think I was the last person
We got to
thinking
get to this
this in any
interview. Get
case.
to your
So,
get to
so,
the get to your point.
so, yeah. So to me, um, I feel like Nicole is like a lot of other people that I've talked to throughout time, where you do date some people who, you think are the opposite of the person you were married to, or just different than the person you're married to. It doesn't mean that they're good. It doesn't mean that they're good people. And it also doesn't mean that there's not hope for somebody else. As you can imagine, and you talk about this a lot, when you go onto dating apps, there are literally thousands of people. You make a choice for whatever reason. Maybe you're looking at their picture, maybe you don't get to their profile. We'll talk about this in another episode about profiles and how to write them better, and how to gain more attention, and get to the right people. But I think that this is a legit thing. So I think for Nicole, um, don't lose hope, because that's a big part of what we have in terms of dating. And I think from my experience, I also have dated, and I know sometimes people don't think that women can be narcissists, but they can be. Women can be extremely competitive with the people that they're dating. And I've dated all types. And Nicole, just keep listening. And as we go forward, I'll start to share some of those experiences, because I think they're highly relevant to people who are out there dating. It's tough, and I don't want to say I've wasted time, because to the point of how we started off the show, we talked about, do you want to talk about your past with somebody? And I do, simply because my past is what's formed me to be the person I am today. So I need to talk about that if you want to be able to date me and understand me and get along with me. So I think that that's important. So I think all these experiences that people are having now, and in Nicole's situation, seemingly not positive experiences, are forming you for the ultimate time where you meet somebody that is a good match for you, and you will share those experiences because you're okay sharing those experiences because you're not afraid to share your past because it makes your current and future all the more hopeful.
I think people often are more afraid. This is anecdotal, but I think people are often more afraid to hear the other person's past, that something might come up that upsets them, as opposed to sharing theirs. Most people, I think, are okay with sharing their past. Not all of it, certainly, especially things that are, very, very personal, until you know someone well enough that you can trust them. But I think it's the other way around. I think it's the unknown. If you open somebody else's closet and a skeleton falls out, you don't know what that skeleton's going to look like. And I think that's what people are scared about. Personally, that's my experience.
And I think really quick, I think that's legit. I think that is a reflection on both of you, though, the person you're dating and yourself, that if you're truly in a place where you're comfortable and confident in you and your ability to form a relationship with someone, their past shouldn't matter. It just doesn't. It just doesn't.
Uh,
And again, you're talking about, you mentioned something to me, I think one of the last episodes, that you know my the one percenter thing, which I did not like. Um,
oh, I know.
and so with that though, I will say I like to date. I have throughout the past, many years, empowered women, and empowered mean that they have careers, and they're usually, pretty smart, and successful, relative, whatever that
I think our
exactly
audience is
means.
smart enough to know what empowered means. Go ahead.
Right. So to me, I like that, and I like to hear about it, and I like to know about it. It doesn't always work out. That's sometimes brings a lot of issues anyway. Um, but a lot of guys can't handle that. We're speaking about guys specifically. They can't handle. They want someone who is. I'm not saying all guys. I'm saying some guys want somebody who is a little bit more subservient to them, and doesn't have such a checkered past, and doesn't have, like, these big relationships, and can't handle the fact that a woman might have been dating somebody who is, really successful before, and really wealthy, and it makes them feel smaller. And the reality is, they're not with that person anymore. They're now dating you. So be comfortable with yourself, be
Sure.
confident with yourself, and don't worry about who they dated before, because obviously it didn't work out. The fact that they might have been driving a Ferrari does not make them a better guy than you. It just makes
No.
them a guy who was able to afford a Ferrari.
Well, and it might make them a better guy than you, but it didn't make them a better fit for that person because they're not with that person. It's not a judgment of who that
Right.
other guy is, because, as to your
Right.
point, it doesn't matter. Two quick things before we get to this interview. I just want to point, in response directly to sort of what Nicole said. The first thing, excuse me, is more just in like a general point about all of this stuff, Scott, that we're talking about. Like, a lot of it has to do with fear. And I haven't talked about this as much as I talked about my entire life. But my ex and I dated when we were in high school for a year, into college, split up in college in a bad way, worse than our divorce, frankly. That breakup, at least the toll it took on me, I think, was very similar. And I held on to that baggage for a real long time. And I think by a real long time, I mean about 15, 20 years. Like, I still had that insecurity and had that baggage. I looked over my shoulder every day of our marriage that she was going to leave again. She was 19 when that happened. That's totally unfair, but that's how I lived my
Yeah.
life. I didn't process that properly. And so what I've done now when I go out there with people is, that's not my past with them. Whatever they did in their past, even
Correct.
yesterday past, that's not my past with them. That's not my story with them. My story starts when we meet. And if you can go into it with that mindset, I think that's a healthier way, because then you don't have to bring all that insecurity and all that baggage with you that I did. And again, like, I look back now that my mental health is a lot more stable, which is another word I hate, but in this case, it's the right word. And it upsets me a great deal that I wasn't able to see that when it was happening. And I think it really hamstrung my life. The second thing I was saying, this directly to
To
Nicole,
this point.
to this point.
Yes.
Thank you for undercutting my progress.
No, that was supportive.
Oh, all right. I took that as like, I'm going to regress. Like to this point, you're
No,
doing fine. Now you're
no,
gonna.
I meant that
Anyway,
hamstrung you to this point. Yes, that was a positive. That was
okay.
a
All right. Well,
hopeful
yeah.
thing.
Yes. Fair point. Anyway, directly to Nicole's point. And this is what I said to this woman yesterday who said, you know, she's 47. She doesn't have any friends. She doesn't have any prospects. She dated a guy for 2 years that she met on Tinder. And, you know, that ended up not, they were engaged and it ended up not working. He ended up cheating or whatever. I have really tried to not find a person to fill the role in my life that I want. I'm not trying to find a girlfriend. I'm not trying to find a wife. I'm not trying to find a hookup. What I'm trying to find are people who I want in my life. And once I establish that I want them in my life, then I determine where that is. Because there are people who I've met on dating sites who are my best friends, like confidants, know everything about me. And we've only known each other for 8 months. Everything. Because I didn't pigeonhole them into, I want to date this girl or woman. I did you. I want to date this woman. I was thinking about high school again. So, and that's what I'll say. So, and this happens more often than not. I mean, there are people who work with us who are people who I originally, you know, had a romantic thing with, and then that didn't work out. That wasn't what that person's job was in my life. That wasn't the role they were supposed to play long term. And I think if you can do that, and I talked to a couple of people this weekend who are ethically non-monogamous and polyamorous, and that's the perspective that they have. You want to attract people, and then you fill your roles. And even if you don't find that significant other for the rest of your life, you've now added really, really great people to your life. It may not be the one role is the most important to you, but you won't block off everybody else. You'll be able to find a spot for them. And all of a sudden you have a network of friends like I do who can really help you in life. And you don't feel so alone. And I know it's hard to do, especially when you've been out there as long as you, Scott. Some people just want to find that person. But why not find a lot of people and then see if any of them really fit?
Yeah, I think that's great that you've been able to do that, and I hope that you can maintain that. That is really hard to do. It's really hard to do when you start to date people for a longer period of time. Unfortunately, you know, there are people who are looking for their next person, and if you're not going to be it, they don't want any more friends. So
Yes.
you're in a position where you're looking to find friends and, you know, and look at this group and find who's fitting in your life in certain ways. A lot of people don't want that. A lot of people don't want to be dating people and turn them into friends. So those relationships come and go, and that's okay too. Like,
that happens to
I
me
have
too. It's
plenty
not
of
like I
friends.
pull in, but Scott, it's not like I take in everybody. One woman said, I think we're better. We hung out once. It was fun. She's like, I think we're better as friends. And I was like, you know, I have enough friends. But it was nice hanging out with you. And you cut bait. It doesn't have to be everyone. And to that point, and I wouldn't say this other than, because I know how you feel about this, I wouldn't say this other than because she mentions it in the interview we're about to play, but Dawn Aversa is one woman who I met on a dating app. We haven't gone out. We have talked about it. We live kind of far from each other. And we bring it up in this because she did it. So I figure I'll preempt it. She might handle my finances. Like, think about that. Like, you meet someone who you're like, maybe we'll go on a date. No, I'm going to hand her all my money now, like all my money. And so it's interesting that like that might be the role that is better suited for the two of us in each other's lives. That it might be more of a professional role.
I think that's the better role for the two of you.
Yeah, because you don't want me dating our guests.
I absolutely do not want you dating our guests.
I don't want that either. If yes, I want people to. Yeah, let's just say yeah. Let's just whatever I'm going to say is not going to help,
bro. Yes, I agree.
I wasn't going to say anything bad about any of our guests. I was going to say something bad about myself, but
I knew you were.
I don't want to do that.
I understand. I think that.
Let's get to that now. Let's get to the interview with Dawn. Again, as we say, and we need to tease this. This is a long interview. You're not going to hear all of it. You're going to hear pertinent parts to how we discuss things on the show. There's a lot more detail. And if you go to divorcedadplaybook.com, there's links and there's ways to get into our back end. We have a membership situation that you will see a lot of helpful stuff. She really, really explains things thoroughly and well. Again, go to the site and you'll see all of that. That's special for our members. But this stuff is sort of more pertinent to the broader audience, Scott. And I know when we get back on the other side, you want to talk a lot about some of this. It might be some stuff that you haven't heard in the interview, but you can get it. We can certainly get access to that, and you can listen to that.
Right.
All right.
I look forward to it.
I'll be back in a little bit. One of the great things about doing this show is when you have people who you know from different walks of life, but then they listen and then say how much they love the show. And then you're like, wait, you should be on it. And so this is what happened today. Dawn Aversa, you are posting stuff on Instagram about life insurance, and it is scaring me and hitting home. And so when you wrote me, just what is like some innocuous comment about like an episode that you were listening to, I'm like, wait a minute, you need to be on one of these. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And so just to be clear, like you literally just listened on your own. You weren't like trying to either sue me or were mad at me or
No. Well, if you recall, and this, it turns out I'm not the first person this has happened with, but we matched on Bumble, I think.
I love how you say that this is not the first person.
No, because I
It's
do
just
watch
terrible
I had
reputation,
been
isn't it?
watching and listening to the show, so I know I'm not your first guest that this has happened with.
Oh my God.
Um, but then we ended up following. We never went on a date,
No.
but I did end up following you on Instagram, and I remember you mentioning that you and your brother were working on this, and I thought it was a great, I'm a divorcee, and I thought it was a great idea. Um, and then as I listened, just I can't tell you how many times I'd be on the treadmill listening to the show and thinking to myself, like, either laughing, finding it like, even though obviously divorced dad, divorced mom, and
Sure.
that's different, but still finding it very relatable. And then other times on the opposite end of the spectrum, wanting to just yell at you for things.
What
So,
did you? That was probably one of the days after we matched online. And by the way, can I just say this? And I'm trying to be as professional as possible because not like you're embarrassing me. I wasn't going to even bring that up, but we do live a little far away from each other, right? Like over an
yes,
hour, I think. So it's not
yeah,
like it's not like you live next door and I'm like, no, I want you on the show. I would love to hang out with you even just platonically, but like it is a bit of a hike and it's going to snow.
it's a bit
So
of a
like
hike.
at some
Yeah,
point we'll figure it out.
yeah, that sounds good.
But I'm glad to have you here. And I will say that while I do appreciate that you saw that and want to yell at me, honestly, that's maybe the best compliment you can get, right? If somebody's mad enough to want to yell at you, then you said something effective. But you wrote something effective to me, and I want to read this. This is from one of your Instagram posts that I think this is the one that actually got me to reach out to you. You said life events, the big ones, the ones that change everything, buying a home, getting married or divorced, having children. Do you know how important life insurance is through these big milestones? And then you wrote, do you know that life insurance is capable of more than just protection of your loved ones? I'm going to answer this as like let's just say like an idiot, as I'm usually called on this show. I didn't even think of that kind of stuff. I thought about it in my perspective from, we have a life insurance policy and now how do we split that up? But I didn't even think about like in terms of buying a home, obviously getting married, but like how much of your life ties into that? I mean, I know it's life insurance, but most people kind of think of it as death insurance, right? Like in case something happens to you. How much of
Sure.
it is actual life insurance?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's easy to not want to think about life insurance because at the end of the day, the main purpose of it is a death benefit. And nobody wants to think about, particularly when we're young, nobody wants to think about when that happens, how that happens, or it's kind of such a far off thought that it's not something that we want to bring attention to now. But life insurance serves so many more purposes than just that death benefit. Um, if you're buying a house, for example, you're going to want to make sure, and more times than most, the bank is going to want to make sure that
Mhm.
if something happens to you, that loan is going to be satisfied without any problems with that. So you'll frequently see, more times than most, they kind of put that into a mortgage payment, but
Okay.
you are better off looking for it elsewhere because it's usually more cost effective and a better plan in general.
And it's interesting that you're going through such a traumatic life experience when you get divorced that you don't think about what happens down the line. And that's a lot of what our show has been talking about, especially in the last few episodes. But what you do is I mean, that's 100% what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of, interestingly enough, how I ended up in this career choice and this career path was a personal experience. I mentioned that I'm a divorcee, and I've tried to coin a term that's more appropriate for it because my ex-husband passed away a year ago, just over a year ago. So I'm not a widow essentially,
Right.
but I'm almost like not even a divorcee anymore. So I'm like, widow-say?
I don't want to laugh. I mean, I
Is
shouldn't laugh because
I
I
think
feel
that might be the
horrible
appropriate
situation.
term for it at this point, is widow-say. And he was not insured,
Oh.
which was just blindsiding. I mean, obviously, when you deal with a loss, there's the emotional component and grief, and particularly, I have 2 daughters.
Yeah.
You know, that's the focus, and to just, it's adding insult to injury when someone didn't plan ahead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think for me, it was not wanting people I know, people I care about, to go through a similar experience. And it's so important. And, you know, just real quick, like, there's different types of coverages. It's so easy and far more cost effective than people realize to just put a term policy in place that covers you for X amount of years, especially when you have kids, up until they're the age of 18 or 21, whichever, you know, you prefer, just knowing that if something happens to you, your children are taken care of.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that, again, as a sort of not fully formed adult at parts of my life, I didn't even think about that. You always want to take care of your kids when you're around. You don't necessarily think about what'll happen when you're not there. And in a situation like yours, where when you're not prepared for it.
But I think it's easy to almost, like, in the setting of divorce, it's almost, you know, more times than most, divorce is contentious. You know, that relationship between your ex gets, I mean, in the perfect world, it'd be fine. You could easily co-parent and
Right.
everything would
I like
be
how you pause there.
simpatico and just wonderful. And it's not, more times than most. So I think it's easy to kind of look at it and be like, well, if I have life insurance, then my ex benefits from it if something happens to me.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, sure, that's one way to look at it, but at the end of the day, your ex is becoming the only parent. And there's a difference. And I had a friend who pointed it out to me before my ex passed away. And she's like, well, you're not a single parent, you have a co-parent. And I was like, kind of offended by her statement. I was like, I'm a single parent.
Yeah.
It is very different being a single parent
We
and
actually
not
talked about
having
that.
co-parent counterpart.
On the last episode, we had that conversation, different circumstance in the story that we were discussing. And obviously yours is on top of dealing with the kids yourself, the sort of trauma of having, not only, I mean, I would imagine we didn't really talk too much about this in the past, but I know we touched on that, but the emotional weight of that for you, but certainly having to then be there for your children.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an added component, that not only just being there for your kids all the time, but through that process, it's got to be really tough. And again, and Scott talks about this a bunch on the show, like, as you said, like, you need a different term for somebody who's divorced and then that person passes away. Like, I think we need a different term for single parent, because I do think that if I say I'm a single parent, and maybe it's just something like I'm a single co-parent or whatever, but it's totally different than what you're going through. And
Yeah.
when I heard what you were going through, I'm like, well, this isn't the same. Like, I can't, you know, and it's one of those, like, I'll drive to you. Don't worry about it. Like, if we hang out, I'm coming to you. Like, don't take any more time away from your kids than you need to. You know, we'll just do it on a day where I don't have my kids, because it's a totally different life experience.
Yeah, it is. And something so simple as, you know, my work schedule, anything that needs to happen, not having that counterpart to balance out a schedule with, that's childcare costs, and something that, like, a life insurance policy would have assisted with. And I think it's, again, I go back to that, like, I think that something else that I wanted to kind of talk about with both that's not really specific to the life insurance, but in terms of those contentious divorces.
Mhm.
And it's so easy to hate your ex, to be angry with them, to feel like they're not pulling their weight with the kids. And yet and the amount of times I had wished my ex out of my life
Mhm.
through our divorce, post-divorce, more times than I can count. And I really hope that somebody's listening that is, and like, I'm sure going through that contentiousness and that bitterness and the hurt and all of that. And I promise you, what you're going through is far better than the alternative,
Do you
because I would
regret
take
those
back.
thoughts?
Yeah, of course I do. And I think it wasn't until after he passed that I could really actually take a step back and look and be like, it wasn't as bad. He wasn't as bad as I thought it was in the moment.
Mhm.
I would go back to arguing about the cost of extended day in a second if it meant that I didn't have to have that conversation with my kids.
Can I ask you some like a little quick hit specifics? Because like I said,
Yeah.
I'm like a
Yeah,
high school kid. I have
absolutely.
no idea about this stuff. You mentioned before that you should get just sort of like a not a whole life term, like a term policy if you're not interested in spending a ton of money, or if your kids are going to essentially age out in a few years and be their own adults. What is the difference in cost between that? What would be a smart thing? I mean, my kids are, teenagers and almost teenagers. I have life insurance, but say I didn't. Like, what would you recommend for someone in a similar situation, a year out of divorce and sort of looking to become more independent?
Okay, so bottom line, I think every parent, both divorced and married still, should have at least $1 million. If you have children, at least $1 million in term coverage that would get them to your children until the age of 18, 21, around that time area.
If my kid wants to go to Princeton, should I make that 2 million? I just
Well, I mean, but the term policy is only going to be beneficial if something happens to you.
fair
That's the
point.
downfall. They're inexpensive, but if 10 or 20 years, however long you put that term in place for, once that time has passed, like that's it, that policy, you're going to put another term policy in place if you choose.
It's like leasing a car, essentially.
It's exactly like the difference between term and whole life is leasing versus buying. Very good, Dan.
Thank you. Well, I know about that because
Yeah.
it's that I've done before. But and I remember when we were talking about this, we were deciding sort of which to do, and and again, I know everybody's circumstance is different and things like that. But I guess, which do you recommend? Is it because one of them sounds more cost effective in the short term, but there's obviously less of a safety net on the other end. The other one, for people who are maybe split their income now and have a lot less cash, or are paying alimony or paying child support, all of a sudden, where do you rank those things? Because I would venture to guess most people think, okay, I have to pay alimony or child support or both. I have to pay my rent and utility bills. I have to feed my children. And all of a sudden there's not a lot left.
Yeah, that's true. My recommendation is if you can put a whole life policy in place, the younger you are, the better. Because I work with clients all the time and I see, they're in their late 50s, their term policies coming up, and now what the cost of a new term policy is at their age versus what a whole life policy could have been in their 30s, in their 40s. It's a frustrating position to be in, because then you get into a place where it's like, it's not cost effective. The average American family is going to struggle with putting a permanent policy in place. So for any of your
Right.
listeners, the younger you are, the better. And the benefit to the whole life policy is that it does build cash value. So if you're in your 30s and you don't have a whole life policy, talk to a professional about getting one, because you can take tax-free, interest-free loans from that policy.
Mhm.
So
You
whether
can do
that
what I did
means,
essentially with a disability
yeah,
thing, and obviously
yeah,
that
whether
might
that
be a unique
means
situation, but
helping your child, helping to pay for your kid's wedding down the road or their college education. You can build up enough cash value depending on the original face amount to offset your taxes at retirement. If you retire and you have a pension, Social Security, a 401k, those things are tax deferred as you're putting into them, but then you pay taxes on retirement for them. Where do you get the money for the taxes? Are you taking it out of that and then living off of less per year? Or do you want to have a whole life policy that you can use, borrow that money from to pay those taxes and live to your fullest in retirement?
You don't by chance have a time machine where I can go back into my 30s and do this? Because now I feel like an idiot. Like,
I've been working on one and it's not, I don't suggest using it.
One thing I didn't ask, and I know I said it was my last, but one thing I didn't ask, you mentioned earlier about if you have kids, you should have at least $1 million of coverage. If you have 2 kids, do you need 2 million? Like, where is that cutoff? Obviously, kids under 18, if you buy food, it's not double the cost always to feed 2 kids as opposed to 1. And there's got to be some sort of calculations that you have in terms of that. But ballpark, how much is it per kid? How much should you be insured? Not how much is it? How much should you be insured per kid? Does that change, or is it just sort of having that sort of $1 million-esque policy? And then if you can do more than that, certainly do that. Would cover most of the base costs of living for your ex and I think
again that goes back to the whole does it fit situation, because it really depends on, at the end of the day, you're going to want to leave your, whether that's children, for anybody who's listening that's married, your spouse, what income are they going to be missing? We're looking at, so it's not even necessarily per kid. For me personally, I have double the amount that I would suggest most people, because if something happens to me at this point, there is no co-parent. My children will have a guardian that cares for them. And while I believe I chose well for that, it's not their child. So thinking about that kind of so it really, which is why essentially we're going to go back to sit down with a professional, because it's not such a cut and dry, X amount per kid. It's like, well, how much are you making? What income is going to be missing in the event of something happening to you?
I want to hang out with you now because can we create like a consultation? Like, can you take over my policy? Because I think that would be the easiest way for us to, like, now it's like a professional relationship.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to be unprofessional and be like, hey, do you want to, like, can you, and I mean this somewhat seriously. Like I got the guy who did mine. It was not my choice. That was my ex getting, can I pull out of that deal and be like, hey, I need somebody who else is like going to take care of my needs? Because I don't know if this guy's taking care of my needs. I didn't hire him.
Right.
My ex did.
I would certainly, a couple people come to me with previous coverages, and it becomes a conversation on, does it make sense to do so? Is it beneficial for you to do so? And I'd love to have that conversation with you.
All right. Well, let's not do that on here because I don't want to disclose any of
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on doing this.
Yeah, no problem. I got to say, and you probably won't like what I have to say, but I think your brother will get a real kick out of it.
Oh boy.
And listening and watching the show, I think you're awesome. Let's just put that out there. I think you're great.
Okay.
Great
I'm
personality.
still recording, by the way, so just be careful what you say here. So just go ahead, finish your thought.
Listening to your dating endeavors.
Well said.
Yep. There's been a time or two I'm like, wow, dodged a bullet with that one.
Come on, you're like the 4th person to say that this week.
I mean, again, I think hanging out with you would be lots and lots of fun and entertaining to just be able to hear and witness all of, but you're not the only one. I think everybody and I sent you a text, I think after one, like watching or listening to one of the shows, I'd sent you a text, like everyone goes through that stage. I think it's an important stage.
Yeah. Actually, we talked about that. I didn't mention it was you because I knew you were going to come on the show at some point, but we talked about that on the show about how, you said like everyone goes through this. And I reject that because I feel like that puts me in a category of like, everybody does it. And that makes me.
I called it chronic dating.
Right. We talked and we read it. And I
Yeah.
said to Scott afterwards, and that was one of the cut-ups. If you follow us on Instagram, that was one of the cut-ups that we just did, because I think it actually came out yesterday on the day we're recording. I think it came out a couple of days ago for people who are listening, that that's how I end up making out with homeless women. Because people like you were like, oh, you're just like everybody else. I'm like, no, I am not. Don't do that to me.
Is that why you did that though?
But you are at least the third person this week who says, well, I dodged that bullet. The life lesson in all of this. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Don't overshare. Don't share at all. Don't say anything to anyone.
Well, I mean, maybe not that. I'm not very good at that.
Well, that's my new rule. So this show's going to suck from now on. Honestly, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We talk about a lot of topics. We try to have fun on here, Scott. This is one of those topics that I feel out of my depth. And so I really appreciate Dawn coming on and sort of helping me through this. And that's the beginning of, I think, a lot of times she's going to help me. But I know this is something that is when we built the Divorce Dad Playbook, you brought up two things at the beginning. We want to help people with legal things, not legal advice, but we want to put them in contact with people. We want to give them the information they need. And we want to help people with financial things, specifically with life insurance, investment, family planning, estate planning. And this falls right into that. So I know this is really important to you.
Yeah, I think she's great. And I look forward to being able to share everything with the audience, on the site, as well as what she was just talking about. I do have my own experiences with this, and it's really interesting. I mean, I sort of threw you a few questions to
Oh,
ask
sure.
her.
Yeah.
So
I'll admit, Scott, this is the first time I'll actually admit this on the show. I wasn't that smart. All that came from you. I mean, there were a couple of things personally, obviously, with the disability thing that was mine, but like the rest of it, I just read questions you gave me. So
yeah, no, which is great. So just for the sake of the audience, because I think that this is at the point where we are, is that our knowledge and experiences need to be shared, and we're sharing them from our own experience as well as from our experts. And so I really appreciate Dawn coming on, and we'll have her on in more depth, and maybe even next time I'll join the interview, because obviously I want to talk a lot about this. But a couple of the things that happened to me and why I feel so strongly about this is, some of the questions you're asking. So when I was still married, we got life insurance as soon as we had our kids. Just, it was just what the smart play was. And by the way, we were young, and it was fairly cheap.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what Dawn. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we first got term life insurance. Now, my financial advisor at the time, who I still work with actually, spent a long time talking to us about whole life, and it's confusing. I'll admit, and it's somewhat hard to understand and explain the difference between term and whole life, as again, Dawn speaks about too. So I won't go back over what she was saying.
I kind of like my analogy with the cars, but either way, it's like a lease and a buy.
Yeah. I get your analogy.
I'm like an analogy. Don't even.
No, but it's just not exactly the way that I saw it, because the analogy of a lease and a buy of a car is eventually your car is going to become no value, like no matter what, like when you buy a car, eventually it loses its value. Whole life actually gains value, and you can use it for a variety of things. It's actually a savings vehicle, and I didn't really understand this. And to be honest, once so I had my ex and I each had a term life insurance policy, right? A significant term life insurance policy, which is fairly inexpensive to cover the kids, God forbid. And that ends when we're like 60 or something. So that's just to bridge the gap. And we had two whole life insurance policies. Not sure why we had two whole life insurance policies, but to the question on what people are thinking about, like finances are tough when you get divorced. There's a lot of money being split, amongst two households. So what we ended up doing was we got the cash value out of one of our whole life policies, and we kept the other one. And every year since my divorce, I talked to my financial guy before that fairly significant whole life insurance payment is due. And I say, explain to me again why I'm doing whole life insurance and why I'm spending all this money. And what's interesting about it is, at the beginning, I really didn't get it. I just doing it because my financial advisor was giving me that advice.
Right.
But what I've recognized now is when I make my whole life insurance payment, and this is now going on at least 15 years of having this whole life policy, the minute I put money into my whole life insurance policy, my policy goes up by more than the money I put in. So my cash value of my policy is actually greater than the money I put into it immediately. And that's
Sure.
the benefit. If you can hang in there on a whole life insurance policy and you have extra money, I don't always have extra money, so I got to figure it out. It's a really good savings vehicle because, to be honest, my whole life insurance policy is a backup plan for my kids' college right now. So I
Which
can
you can,
actually
which you can
borrow
take
the
out
cash
against that.
value.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I can borrow from the cash value and pay for college. And you know what? Over the years, I didn't know if I was going to have that. So I felt like I was better off saving somewhere, somehow, and having consistent dollars. Now, my whole life insurance policy did not make as much as the market did in 2020, but it's been consistent over the years, or the past
Probably made
15
more
years.
than it did in 2019.
Well, no,
Maybe
it's just
not,
a
but
consistent. It's just a consistent growth vehicle. So it's not making more or less. It's just
similar.
consistent. So I know what I'm going to have.
Similar to that, and this is something Dawn and I talked about after we recorded. She and I were on the phone for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, which is why, by the way, I didn't respond to you when you were texting me saying, "Where the hell are you? How was the interview?" Because I was still kind of doing. I almost snuck the recording back on. I didn't want to do that to her, but it was such good information. And one of the things we talked about, it's not just life insurance. That like I said, it's estate planning, family planning. I for a long time was. Basically like my own business, right? I was a small business. I was a sole practitioner. And so I have a SEP IRA. And prior to that, I had a Roth IRA. And they're similar in the fact that like you're essentially putting in tax-free money, or it's already taxed. You can kind of use it as a little bit of a tax shelter. Some of that money, including when I worked at Rutgers, I can't touch until like I'm 100. I don't even know how that works. Like and my ex, she handled all of our finances. I had no idea how much money we had or how much money I was getting or any of that. She just handled it all, and I trust her still to this day. I wish she was still handling it for me. And she's like, I don't know how, but you have like a ton of money in your old Rutgers account. Like I haven't worked there in like 15 years, 15 years, it feels like 12 years. I don't think I've worked at Rutgers, and I have like a significant amount of money in there. I can't touch it though. I can't touch it or I pay a million penalties until I'm like 70 or 65. And that's kind of stuff that you don't,
Yeah.
I mean, I could pay, that's kind of stuff you don't think about when you're looking at, I mean, I'm 42 years old. I'm not looking at retirement. I just figured I'm going to burn out. Thelma and Louise, man. I'm going off a bridge. And I don't even mean that. I shouldn't have said that.
Don't say that.
That was flippant of me.
Pull it back.
I didn't mean it like that. I meant like the movie, like Blaze of Glory is what I should have said.
Okay. That was an okay save, but anyway, keep going.
It was a terrible save. I apologize to anyone who has listened in the past and actually taken what I've said seriously. I shouldn't have said that. That's my bad. But what I meant to say was I have been reckless with my future in terms of finances. And I know now that things can happen in a blink. What happened with Dawn? She was already divorced, and all of a sudden, there's a big difference between being a single parent with one income and a single parent who's co-parenting. Yep. Humongous difference, and financially is the biggest one. And it's interesting that is what was the catalyst for her to get into this industry, let alone to start preparing for her life in the future.
Yeah, that was really inspirational, obviously, and very impressive, which I did not know about her, obviously, until she talked about it. The other thing that I would say, which I think this is really interesting, and this is new for me, and it might just be where I am in my life, where my kids are. I actually had a conversation with Jack, and what I realized is, if something were to happen to me, so it's great, I have insurance, right? So the kids should be okay. But I also, I don't have things organized as well as they should be organized. So I was saying to Jack the other day, I was like, you know what? I want you to do this with me. I want you to come up, I want you to sit with me and go through all the stuff that I have, whether it be insurance or investments or just like little things I have here and there, because it might not be a lot. Maybe I have $5,000 in this one account, but if I don't share that with somebody, nobody will have any idea, God forbid something were to happen. Nobody have any idea where it is. And so there's no path. So although I feel like I've done some good things, nobody would be able to find it. So I need to get that organized. And actually that came out of a conversation I had with Mom a couple of weeks ago, where we were just talking about, her and Dad and their stuff and their finances and what could happen and all that. And we were having a whole conversation, and
Are
I
you going to
realized,
handle
you know what?
that? Is that your responsibility? Thank God. Oh my God. I thought that
Yeah,
was
it's
going to be
totally,
on me.
no, it's definitely not on you, dude.
Oh my
It's
God.
totally my responsibility.
I'll handle the eulogies. I've already started, by the way, just writing that.
Well,
So
oh
if you want.
God.
What?
When you've already
No,
started.
I went to 2 funerals of very close family friends, and both people, Brian and the other people, were comedy writers in across the country, and so
Yeah.
I don't want to put their name. Hilarious, like amazing stories. And the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, this is just a wonderful remembrance of their parent. This is so much pressure on me because I'm going to be the one who's got to do this. So that
Yeah.
moment, I started writing Dad's eulogy. Is that bad?
Okay. I mean, it's weird. So
Oh
okay, so
boy,
you can do it the eulogy.
this
I'll
episode's
deal with
taking
the
it to
finances. Yeah.
Scott. You should never let me be on a show where we talk about life insurance, like anything about life and insurance. Like this is just, I'm on
Yeah.
tilt. I'm saying stupid shit.
Yeah. Okay. So stop. So I think that that's an important thing too for anybody. So I agree. If you didn't get insurance, what I would say is if you didn't get insurance while you were married and started to have kids, and then you got divorced, get insurance, even if it's term.
Oh yeah.
Just get it. Right. Just don't think about it. Just make it one of those things that you have to get. You have to take care of your kids. You have to be responsible. Get insurance, make sure they're okay. Has nothing to do with your ex. It's all about your kids. It's not money for your ex. It's money for your children so they can make it through until they can get a job. Number one. Number two is get your stuff organized. I'm going through this right now. I'll be happy to share that with people as I have things that are easier or harder because we have a million passwords in our lives. And like I'm looking for a password keeper kind of
Don't
thing.
share your
Because I think
passwords with us. You
I'm
said you're
not
going to
sharing
share
any
stuff with us,
passwords.
not the passwords.
I'm not
Please
sharing
don't.
passwords. I'm trying to find an app that I feel comfortable and confident with that can secure and hold all of my passwords so that could be there and ready for anybody who needs it. But I do think that you need to have a plan, not only to have the insurance, but also where everything is, how people can easily get to it. Because again, if we learned anything from this year, like nothing is guaranteed. And I just want to make sure that, again, unfortunately, if something were to happen, as Dawn was talking about and experiencing, that we are prepared and that my kids don't have to suffer any more than the emotional part of if something were to happen. That
Sure.
at least financially, that they'll be okay to continue their lives. And I think that we owe that to our kids at the very least to make sure that they have a financial chance to make it moving forward, no matter what age they are.
You end the show every week or every episode. We do twice a week usually with kids first, and we talk about that on the site as well, and like kind of what that means is a bigger, became like a little catchphrase for you the way we end the show. But it's more than that, and I think more than any other part of our show, Scott, this is where the kids first part comes into play. You want to be a good parent all the time. You want to be a good ex, at least good as you can be, because that impacts your kids. Missy Beck was on, we talked about that. The kids are sponges and they see everything. So you always want to put your kids first. But this is where you really need to. Your kids
Right.
can be a little messed up in the head, but if you don't leave them financially stable, if you just don't prepare them for life without you, that is not putting them first. This to me is where you hammer that home. So I leave the rest to you. I don't know where else you wanted to go with this, but this is one where I don't really have much to say, and I've been saying stupid shit. So I'm gonna pull myself out of this and not put my foot in my mouth again. Is there anything other than kids first that you have to say? Because that feels to me like this is like the umbrella of this whole experience.
Yeah, all I would say is I think that this episode and what Dawn was talking about more than anything was a big part, as you said at the beginning, a big part of my vision for creating this playbook. And I know people that are listening to the podcast, you're getting a taste of it. What people need to realize and understand is that this is an overwhelming experience that you go through, and you can't possibly excuse me, you can't possibly be ready and prepared for all this. It's kind of like when you first get married and you think about having kids, and there's like everyone gets you books, what to expect when you're expecting, and all these other books.
Right.
Like they give you the playbook. Like you still don't know when you have this little baby in your hands, like what the hell you're doing, and the fact that you're not going to get any sleep, you're going to be worrying for the rest of your lives. but they do give you a playbook and it makes you feel a little bit more calm, confident, and secure. Well, nobody gave me a book when I went through this. And nobody made me feel
Do we have to
calm,
write that book?
confident, or secure. I think we might.
What to expect when you're
However,
exiting instead of expecting?
right.
Hmm.
Maybe. But until we write that book, that's why we're building out this site,
Right, but we are
because
writing the book.
the site, right, the site has the information that I couldn't get when I was going through this, and that set me back. It really did. I wasn't prepared. I wasn't mentally or physically or emotionally prepared to go through a divorce, and I struggled, and I struggled way more than I should have had I had a resource, or had I had any friends. At that point, I didn't have any friends that went through it. So I was the first. And then I became that sort of quote unquote expert because I had been through it before my friends had been through it. But the reality is, the whole point of this, yes, we have some fun. And yes, we talk about things that may be more pertinent to others. However, this kind of stuff is important to everyone. And this is why, and I'm not being flippant about the fact when I say kids first, I truly mean it. It's how I live my life, is that I make sure that I put my kids first, and that they are taken care of and they're set up not only to have a normal as normal. I know you don't like that word, it's a 4-letter word, but
Yes.
you have to think about it like that, that I want them to have a fighting chance to succeed in life. And it's my responsibility until they're really out on their own to make sure that they're taken care of to the best of my ability. So stuff like this, which are simple things that you might just not have ever thought about with regards
Yeah.
to insurance. And I hope right now, after this, after hearing Dawn, after hearing us talk about this, that you do think about it. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Dawn. She was really helpful
Yeah.
to help, whoever
And by
has
the way, for
questions
people
about
to do
this.
that, because I
But
know people who are listening don't see the stuff come up on the site or on the screen, excuse me, when we're on YouTube. If you do go to our site, we do have in the blog part links to all of the shows. You can see the podcast. So, go and listen and watch on YouTube or on our site. But we also have cut-ups of some of the more specific parts of the interview, and you can link directly to her. You can literally, we have her email address, and you can just shoot her an email, because Dawn said, like, hey, tell everybody, like, go ahead, just send me an email directly. So you can absolutely touch base with her. It's very easy to do. We just don't really, Scott, on the show, give people the path that often. And that's on me. I
right,
should do that better.
it's okay. So we
I
would
have one.
encourage that. We'd encourage that really quickly. If you want to take if you have a couple questions before you talk to someone like Dawn, and she's amazing and she'll talk to you about whatever you want to hear. But if
Yeah.
you just feel a little bit more comfortable just asking general questions, you can email me. I will respond. So email me, scott@divorcedadplaybook.com. I'm a big believer in all this. I'm a big believer in getting your finances together. I'm a big believer in insurance and making sure that kids come first.
Can I add one thing before you do the official one?
Yes.
Unless that was your ending, and I apologize for jumping on it.
I can do
But
it
I
again.
just want to point this out, and you'll go insane if you think about it like this, because sometimes you go to the store and you're like, you know what, I'm going to get the bacon on this sandwich, or I'm going to get the whatever, and you add, and it costs a little money. But if you look at this, and this is fascinating to me, take $2, put one in your wallet, and put one in the bank, and then track that for the rest of your life, even just like a regular, like, small interest accruing account. If you had a 6% return over 20 years, that $1 you put in the bank is worth $3.21. 3 times what you just would have spent on bacon or whatever else. And I know you can't think about that with every dollar, because you have to live your life. But it is interesting if you put it in that perspective, that if you just invest smartly and carefully and leave a little bit, which I don't do, I'm talking to myself here, leave a little bit for your kids in the future, you could almost triple your money with very, very little effort. And it's really interesting to think about it that way. And now I'm panicking, and I'm going to go find loose change in my car and put it in some sort of mutual fund.
Well, there's no reason to panic. You just talked about, just because you can't see yourself getting to, age 65 or 70, that you have money out there that you can't necessarily get now, but is around just in case somebody
Right.
needs it. So anything that you put away, whether it's through a 401k, a SEP IRA, all these different financial vehicles is a good thing. get yourself used to putting some money away, not to the detriment of your ability to live. And I know it's tough times for a lot of people right now going through
Yeah,
COVID.
yeah.
It's really tough times. And sometimes, look, I've been through this too. Sometimes I just didn't have the money to put towards this, and I had to find money in order to pay for my insurance policies. And there were times where I thought my insurance policies were going to need to be cashed in because I couldn't afford them anymore. I cobbled together enough money when I didn't have it to make sure they stayed whole. And I'm so glad that I did that, because now I see the value, as I was saying, in those. And I feel like I'm better prepared for not only if something were to happen to me, but even for my kids' future. If I don't have enough money to afford, and colleges are out of control, which how much they cost, if I need to find some money elsewhere, I have this in place now. And it didn't really over time didn't really affect my life or my lifestyle. I just put a little bit, like you said, away to make sure that my kid's future was intact. And I think that everyone needs to try your best to live a little leaner to make sure that your kids have a chance.
Now because I ruined it before, I literally like I'm predisposed. I can't hit the stop button until I hear the words.
I know you can. So with all that being said, obviously I've talked a lot about stuff following what Dawn talked about, and I agree with her, and I really liked having her on the podcast, and hopefully have her more. I will end it with your favorite saying, kids first.